Well, now I can finish up working on these wings and get them ready to put on the fuselage. So I've got these flap cables stick out right there, the old flap cables, and I've got new flap cables installed in the fuselage, but they just stub out. I've got to make those to fit when we put the wings on. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and measure off these, what the distance is from the fabric on the outside edge of that rib to where the eye is in the cable. I want to measure that out and mark that out, and then I'll go ahead and take those cables off of there. And I'll see if I can dig out some Tinnerman nuts to put on that where that fuel tank cover goes. And I've got the fuel hose out. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut off lengths of fuel hose and stick on each one of those hose barbs there and get those all set up for new fuel lines to get hooked into the airplane fuselage. And that will just about do it for the wings for prep. Then we'll be ready to put it on. So then I'll have to get the fuselage set up, put it on the stand and stuff there, and fix its stand for the tail post so we can get it up and get the fuselage level there. Well, I got a measurement for those cables, for the flap cables. The far end of the eye where it goes into the eye on that turnbuckle was 2 3/4 inches on both of them. And then I went ahead and took that cable out of there by unbolting the turnbuckle from the flap control rod in there, the lever, whatever that's called. That was kind of a pain because whoever put that together, it used AN3 bolts in there, and I didn't check to see what size they are, but they're about 3 sizes too long. And they'd have doubled up, tripled up washers on it to make up the difference there for the threads. But the problem with that was that they went in with the heads to the top. That went up against that hard pan there on that false spar. If it had been fabric it went up against, it could have had enough flexibility to get them out of there pretty easy, but those come out kind of hard. Put those cables away. Those cables, there's nothing wrong with them. Those are standard length flap cables, and they're original Piper cables. You can tell by the way the sleeve is compressed on them. The original Piper ones just have a single compression on them, and anything that's done afterwards or in the field has got 3 compression marks on it. On this right wing, I had to take the fuel tank out of there to do a repair on it. When I did, I took the hose barbs and the screens for the outlets of that tank out of there. Well, now I've got to put those back in. These are what the outlet screens look like. They're just a brass bushing, and they've taken a piece of copper mesh, copper screen, rolled it up, soldered it together, closed it off on the end, and soldered it into this brass bushing. So I think that's what, 1/2 inch by 3/8 inch brass bushing. Well, that's got to go in first, and then there's a hose nipple that goes on that. Well, everybody in this day and age uses Teflon tape for sealing on threads, but that's not legal to use on airplanes. And it's not that it doesn't work, it works fine, it's just that people don't put it on right. Well, when you put it on, this stuff strings out pretty bad and tears, and when you put it on, if you put too much on and get it past the end of this threads in there, and then when you put it in and it shreds as you're putting it in, pieces of this Teflon tape come off, and they get in and can block the fuel line or whatever line that they use to put them on with. So you have to use some kind of a gookumpucky on there. I've been using fuel lube for most everything, but I don't have any down here in the hangar right now. Well, I've got this thread sealant here. I'm going to put that on there, and that does a pretty good job of sealing up these threads like this. Alright, there's one of them in. Now, because this has a headerless fuel tank system in it, I have to put 2 of them in, one in the front and one in the back. Now, they put these hose nipples on this airplane, on these tanks, and that makes it a lot easier getting hoses on and off there, I guess. I don't know what they had before. I guess I could look on the blueprints and see what comes standard from Piper on there, but anyway, these things will work, and they just go into those fittings that I just put in there, those screens. That all looks good, so now I can put the hoses on those. I got to replace the Tinnerman nut on the fuel tank cover on the wings, so I'm looking for clean new Tinnerman nuts. I used to use a lot of Tinnerman nuts on my Cessna 170. They used them all over the place in there, had them on the cowling and all kinds of places on that, and I used to replace those with regularity. I just considered them a disposable or throwaway item, so I got lots of them. I kept them handy, and anytime I'd see any of them starting to rust or anything, I just pop it off of there, put a new one on. So there's different types of Tinnermans. There's this type here that's a long one, and then there's this type here, that's two of them together there. It's a medium-sized one. Well, that, and the one I had there that was two, it's a shorter one. I think there's longer ones still. And then there's this kind here that's just a spring, just fits flat. These kind over here are spring steel, and they slide over a panel. A piece goes in here, and then there's a little tab pushed in here where this hole is punched out that actually hooks on the hole that it goes into, and then this is where the screw bites into here. So this tab, this goes face up, and this one you just have to hold on the blind side, on the back side or whatever, and screw that in. That just holds on with pressure. And then let's see what else I got here. Well, I don't have any in here, but they also have some like this, only they come out with ears on them, and they have holes in them, and you rivet them on, so you can be riveted on, and you use a sheet metal screw on those. And this is the type of screw you use on it, is a B style screw, and that has a different, slightly different pitch thread than the pointed screws. So these are what was made to work on those. The pointed sheet metal screws, of course, you know, thread into sheet metal itself, but this is the kind of screw you're supposed to use on those. So most of the ones that I've used on the 170 were for 8s, for number 8 screws. Well, I have to dig through here. All of this stuff here that I've looked at so far in these containers here are all number 8s, for number 8 screws. And probably can't see that, but right here on the flat side, right here, they're stamped. It says 8Z on there. When you get old eyes and bad light, it gets hard to see those. That one there is 8Z, so that's the number 8 screw. And there's one, that's a 10Z, so that's for number 10 screw. So that's what I'm looking for here, is enough of these to get by. I need 6 for each wing tank, so I need a dozen of them. Well, I'll have to go through this. These are kind of mixed up, and I'll have to go through here and see if I can find some 10s. But I did have some 10s. I do have some 10s, but like I said, mostly what I got is for number 8s. I've also got some for number 4s and 6s too, but mostly it's for number 8s. So now the Easter egg hunt begins. I got to go through there and find me a dozen number 10s. I found enough of the number 10 Tinnermans to do both wing tank covers. I may have some more in there, but that was all I needed, so that's all I looked for. Ideally, I would drill those out, I think, and put some nut plates in there, but I'm not going to do that now. So that is done, and we'll go ahead and work on getting those fuel lines hooked up. I've cut a length of SAE 1/4 inch fuel hose here, and that's, I don't know, about 8 inches long or so. And that's going to go on this top fuel gauge line where the vent nipple that I welded on that was cracked. I just welded that new nipple on there. That's going to go on there. I'm putting some Dow Corning DC4 on there. That's silicone grease. Putting that on there. That'll kind of seal that up a little bit, but mainly it's to lubricate this hose to keep it from gluing itself onto that nipple, so it'll twist on the nipple easier and it won't slide off, and it'll hopefully maybe be able to get it to slide off if I need to sometime in the future. So this is going to go on there. I put that grease on the nipple itself, make sure it doesn't get in the hole in the line, in the tubing, and then it'll get on the hose, and we'll slide this hose on there. And that gives me plenty of hose sticking out here that I can maneuver it around and stick on the nipple on the fuselage when I get the wing put on there. So there'll be another one go on this bottom nipple down here, and then a 3/8 inch line go on each one of these nipples for the fuel outlets. And that's exactly the same on the left wing, except the left wing will have one more 3/8 inch line that goes from the fuel pump into the fuel tank that pumps the fuel from the belly tank into the wing tank. So it took a little bit more extreme measures to get this bottom one here for this fuel gauge on than I expected. Now what had happened before is this tube nipple stuck out there, and it doesn't stick out past the flange on that fuel tank. There is a bead in the tube, and whoever did this last time put that hose on there and put the hose clamp right on the bead, because that's what they could get on, was the bead. And they kind of crushed the bead a little bit. I cleaned that up, and I stuck this hose on there a little farther than that. Well, I got it all on there pretty good. But to get that thing to tighten up, there's not a very big hole in there. I could just barely get my finger in there to hold it, but I couldn't get a wrench in there, and I couldn't get a screwdriver on it. So what I wound up doing, the worm screw on that, is a 1/4 inch head on it, on the end of it, the driver end of it, either a flathead screwdriver or a 1/4 inch hex. Well, I couldn't get in there with a hex driver, it was too far and back around the corner. So I tried an extension cord on there, and I still couldn't get it on there. So I wound up doing was getting a wobble socket, a universal socket. This is a 1/4 inch socket, and then there's a little wobble extension and a universal and a long wobble extension, and I was able to get that in there and get that on that screw, that worm screw, and tighten that up, and it's back past the bead on that, so it makes a good seal on it. Anyway, that was kind of fun. So that right wing is pretty much set up. I still have to replace my aileron cables, but this thing can go on the airplane now. This one is ready. Got all the hoses there on the fuel tank on the left wing, and of course that went easier than the right wing because I had it all figured out. Now I got to do one more thing on this tank, is do the same thing that I did on that other tank. I'm going to clean the rust off of that filler neck there. I'll probably put some Cora-Seal on it and paint it, and I'll have to make a skirt for that one like is on the right wing. Can't think of anything else that I need to do on these wings. Oh, I got to clean out those bushings that go through those hinges. I have to clean those out and lube those up. I took a wire brush and cleaned up that fuel filler neck there on that left wing. I didn't try to polish it up, I just knocked the rust down on it. Oh, I spread some Cora-Seal on it. I'll let that cure overnight. Oh, I just went over these hinge points here, these brackets where the spars come out here on the wings and attach to the hinges on the fuselage. I just went through those with a wire brush and cleaned them up, inspected them. So this is the way it comes out. The spar here, and then this bracket comes out. And there's a steel sleeve in there, a bushing in there, and that's replaceable, but I just run a wire brush through there, a round one on my drill motor, and cleaned that all out, and they're in pretty good shape. So I looked these all over and they all look pretty good. Yeah, I feel a lot better now. Things are looking up here, so the wings are ready to go back on. They're looking good. No serious damage to them or anything. I can put them on, and I'm not going to put the flaps or the ailerons on. Everything I need to do I can do without the flaps and ailerons on. Get the wings mounted up, get them all adjusted and everything, get everything all rigged. And then of course the flaps and the ailerons will need to be rigged separately, but it'd probably be even easier to rig these wings without the flaps and the ailerons on there.